So Tricia is a transformational PMO executive with over 20 years of experience across government, education, and nonprofit. And she recently led a program office to deploy $386 million in federal recovery funds. She holds multiple PMI certifications and advises leaders across the globe. So welcome, Tricia.
Yeah,
And next, I'd like to welcome Ben Yuan. Welcome, Ben. So Ben is a PMI authorized training instructor with over 10 years of experience training PMP candidates with consistently high pass rates. And he is a former PMI Hawaii chapter president. He holds an MBA and currently leads global strategic partnerships at Amazon. And so welcome, Ben. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome our moderator, Neha Malik, to the stage. Welcome, Neha. Neha is a dynamic communicator and seasoned professional known for her ability to connect, clarify, and inspire. In her role overseeing the podcast initiative at Puget Sound PMI, she brings insight and creativity to every conversation she facilitates. So welcome, Neha. And before I hand the panel to our wonderful moderator and panelists, I just want to point out on our, we don't have the slide up yet. Okay, so when the slide comes up with all the pictures of the panelists, there will be a QR code on the top right-hand corner, and that is for our audience Q&A. So if you scan that QR code, you can, it should open up a place to ask your questions. And at the end of the session, when we have the audience Q&A, our wonderful moderator, Neha, will go with the questions that are entered by the audience into that app, and that's how we will conduct the audience Q&A. So please feel free to scan that and ask anything you'd like. And with that, I'd like to hand over the panel to our wonderful moderator, Neha. So
thank you so much. Phoi, can we switch? Okay. Thank you so much, Phoi, for the incredible introductions. I'm thrilled to be here and really appreciate the opportunity to get to know the panelists. Over the next hour, we will explore insights on leadership, innovation, AI, and the evolving world of project management. So let's dive right in. Ben, I'll start with you.
Perfect.
Ben, you have trained over 400 PMP candidates and led at both chapter and global levels in PMI. How has your leadership approach evolved as the project management profession has transformed over the last decade?
Wow, we're going straight into the difficult questions. I'm just going to take a quick commercial break real quick. I just wanted to acknowledge the wonderful volunteers and the Puget Sound board for their volunteerism. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to make something like this happen. It's such a marquee milestone. So I just want a round of applause to all the volunteers on the board to start that off.
Thank you.
Neha, to your question, yes, I've been on a journey with a lot of wonderful PMP candidates from all walks of life, whether there be a student, transition in work, or just looking for a new pivot in terms of the career. What's been consistent, both as an instructor as well as a volunteer, as a chapter leader, has never wavered for the last decade plus. It's always to serve the community, the mission and vision of PMI, and take it with a few things. First being servant leadership, like how can I serve my community? How can I serve my students? And I think that also transcends into the workplace of who you want to work with, and that type of concierge type of delivery model. That's why we're in project management, to wow our stakeholders. I get gentle reminders from my students, my colleagues, my peers like yourself, on what it's like to wow the customer. So appreciate you doing this and volunteering. So thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you. And I really appreciate your advice, your insights, everything. Thank you. Kevin, with decades of experience in project leadership and emotional intelligence, how does emotional intelligence actually foster innovation within your project teams?
I like that. Thank you for that question. So how does it, emotional intelligence help encourage innovation within our project teams? So I think one thing around that, and thanks for that question, one thing around that is really getting to know our teams. You know, who are the people on our teams? If we're just kind of sitting back in the captain's seat and our old team's out there doing all the work and you know, come back and report to me and such, you know, it's kind of a top-down leadership approach, which is okay in some cases, but I think it's more important to really get to know the people on your team and not just see them as somebody who's going to get some work done, okay, for me. When we had 5 kids in our family, we raised 5 kids. Now we wanted them to get things done for us, okay? I saw them, we had weeding in the backyard to do. I was like, okay, you get 1/5, you get 1/5, and so forth. And so they knew what their assignment was. But we also cared for them. We knew them really well, and it really applies to work too. In getting to know people, you know, people first. Understand the people first, know them first. People are always more important than the problems, the challenges that we might have. So I think as we get to know them well, we're able to have a better glimpse of their strengths that they have. And in doing so, we're able to understand maybe what jobs, what can we challenge them with next in their position. So having that sensitivity, knowing them, understanding what would be helpful for them, and then also making it safe for them to take on challenges too, that safe space that we hear about a lot. And it's important for us as leaders to help establish that safe space. If we behave differently, if somebody makes a mistake and we just get after them, that's teaching them one thing. But if we say, hey, let's look at this, what can we learn from this experience? You're working on something very challenging right now. It's expected you're going to have a few challenges here and there. So let's look and see what we can learn from this, and then look how far they can go after that.
Absolutely. Understanding people truly drives creativity and results, I believe. Yes. Yeah. Tricia, as someone who's led large-scale government and community transformation, how do you personally define strategic leadership in project management? And how does that definition evolve throughout your career?
How do I define strategic leadership? Well, I'll start off with how I feel it's evolved throughout my career. So my first leadership position was back in the Netherlands. So I attended a university, TU Delft, and I had an internship at an airline called Fokker Airlines. They were an airline manufacturer. And essentially, you know, they hired me straight out of the internship program, so I did not need to do things like write a resume or anything. They were like, okay. And I became the de facto leader of this aerospace engineering team at, I think initially, the first time I was 24 years old. And literally the only reason they chose me was because I was multilingual, and they had team members from throughout Europe. And they thought, well, you're American, and even if you aren't necessarily, they said, qualified, you will grow into the position because the people will respect you because you're from America. I later found out that was not accurate. However, I would say my mindset at 24 was, I don't know how to be a leader, so I will play leader. So I had this idea of a leader as being someone who's in control, who knows everything, and was demonstrating to them that essentially I could perform this role better than you, but hey, I know everything that's going on here. And of course, I slowly learned that that's not what leadership is about. It's not even really about, I used to say, controlling chaos. It was more, as I developed, realizing that I'm developing the leadership qualities within the individuals around me. I'm fostering and developing trust. And trust is not just based on, my academic credentials or the ability to speak multiple languages. It was based on, trusting their decisions and trusting even my own decisions that I had hired the right people to work with me and allowing them to make those decisions. So starting to develop, particularly with strategic leadership, more collaboration in terms of, let's decide this together. So as I've developed, and particularly with working with large-scale portfolios, understanding that it's about collaborative leadership and also being the leader that people need, because you can't just have one way of being a leader. You need to first observe and see what's necessary within those confines. So that's how I've developed.
Thank you, Tricia. Your perspective, blending technical leadership and blending it with community insight is really inspiring. Thank you. Ben, drawing from your PMI authorized training instructor experience, when should a major project rely on internal teams versus forming a strategic partnership to drive success?
Good question. If you don't mind, I'm going to try to rephrase that a little bit.
Sure.
I think I interpret the question like, when are we going to kind of manage the risk and issues in-house with internal teams versus going outside, leveraging partnerships or a vendor? We're all project professionals here, I believe. We are. And at the end of the day, kind of take a quick hand poll, like, who believes you can minimize risk or reduce risk by outsourcing it outside of the company? Okay, a couple, right? So I'm not trying to turn this into a teaching module, I promise. Risk never goes away, right? It's how we can manage it, the rigor behind it, and the consistent approach, right? So you'll hear me in a PMP course or at one of my discussions about must-haves, must-dos. That's like the risk register, the issue log, and so forth. So there's probably never a time where I would completely outsource the risk through a strategic partnership or a vendor. However, your time is valuable, and if there's certain competencies and skill sets that it makes sense to outsource, I think that's totally appropriate. For example, compliance, policy, or a strategic partnership with a third-party vendor where they excel and that's their kind of bread and butter, that would make sense. But please keep tracking the risk. The internal teams aren't let off the hook. So thank you for that question.
That's great advice, Ben. Knowing when to leverage external expertise is so critical. It is. Kevin, with your focus on human-centered leadership, what practical steps can project leaders take to prepare their teams for AI integration while preserving human-centered leadership approach?
I love that. Appreciate that. How many use AI in their jobs right now, or are allowed to? Okay, a lot of you. Okay, sometimes depending on the industry that we're in, it differs. So it's just kind of I'm curious about that, how much we're using it. So AI. I remember going to the PMI Global Conference. When was it? A year and a half ago, maybe. And they're talking all about AI, and I just could barely spell it at that time. And it was like, wow, everybody was talking about it and some great presentations, but I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know how to apply it. So we actually developed a course on how to use AI for project managers, putting together project management or project management plan, kind of the steps to go through that. We just use Copilot. I mean, it's just what we have. I hear it's not the best, but it works well for us. I mean, we're fine with it. And we're, in doing that, realizing, wow, AI can just run and take off with something that you don't even know what it's about and doesn't really have your influence on too much, except for your prompts that you give the prompt engineering. And so really we had to look at that balance. So we teach a class called Gen AI Cookbook, and we have a cookbook that's a picture that's made from AI even. It's really cool. And it's spelled cookbook correctly. It doesn't always do that. So we created this class, and our goal was to help people still feel involved, still have influence, still have their fingerprints all over the work that takes place. Because as PMs, we can go off and use AI and create work breakdown structure, budget, everything like that on their own. But then when we bring it back to our team and show it to them, who of them is going to want to work on that? They were not involved. They weren't involved with the creation of it. So it's so critical for them to do that. I'm still trying to figure out the perfect way to do that, but what I've seen is just bringing in key people, and we actually just use AI together and say, what should we ask it? What do you think about these responses? How should we tailor the question again? But then having them run off with it and say, and maybe do some micro training in our team, and say, okay, you're a tester. How do you use AI right now? And then teach them, if they don't know much, teach them a little bit. So you go run off and you figure out how to best use this so that they're integrating it into their jobs well. And so that way it's augmenting their work rather than them being, it being above them in their work. And then their creativity is going away, and then how much are they needed anymore?
Right. That's very practical advice. And Kevin, I would like to know more about the Gen AI book, maybe later. Yeah.
You bet.
Interesting. Tricia, having led the ARPA PMO in New Orleans, can you share a story from your time leading major recovery efforts, a moment where your leadership was truly tested in the face of urgent community needs? And what guided your decision-making in that situation?
So as a quick review, ARPA, of course, was $385 million that was given to the city of New Orleans to address COVID inequities, and that was given to them by the Biden administration, I would say without really strings attached. So they gave them the money and then stated that, okay, you need to communicate what your PMO plan was, how did you decide on these projects, and demonstrate what value they provided. So as you know, there were many disparities in New Orleans, and one of which was housing disparities. So many people lost, the primary breadwinners in their family passed away because of COVID. And then there was, of course, the rent and mortgage moratorium, but then that ended. And also, most people forget there was also another hurricane that happened during this as well. So these people, and that caused insurance rates for homes to go up. So there were about, I'd say, initially about 40,000 people that were losing their homes. And one of the projects that we had with ARPA was to provide mortgage relief for residents. So we had a project manager who was working on this project, and they were contacted by the media asking them, and they avoided contacting me. They contacted the project manager directly and wanted to know, so, can you tell us about this project? So we were competitively bidding for a provider to, transfer the funds to applicants and that they would apply. But then what happened is they were either misquoted or stated that, yes, we're giving money to people that are losing their homes that were impacted by COVID. So this interview happened at 4:45. The workday in New Orleans essentially ends at 4, so this manager had decided to stay late, had the interview. The next day, because that's ran on the 5 o'clock news, 15 minutes later, there was a statement that ARPA is helping you save your homes. So you need to contact ARPA and they will give you funds to save your home. The next day, and I always lived in Seattle, but I worked in New Orleans. So, and that was on a Friday. When I arrived to work on Monday, there were hundreds of people in line at our office saying that I need to save my home. It's going to be foreclosed next week. I need help now. So, of course, then we debriefed what had happened. The PM stated that, well, I was contacted. It was just someone asking questions. And so then we created a plan to, communicate to everyone. So we sat down, I developed a communication plan to work with the media, to inform them that that was not the case. But for about a month afterwards, every single engagement that we would have with community, we would have several hundred people show up. How can I save my home? And we would just, I ensured that, we made a mistake as a team and that we would help connect you with providers that could help. But essentially, there were still people that still lost their homes. But it was important for accountability as well as complete transparency.
Wow. What a powerful example of leadership under pressure. Wow. Ben, thinking about your cross-functional and hybrid teams, what leadership traits do you believe are most critical for PMs leading cross-functional and hybrid teams in this new era of work?
Well, there's many probably traits that's top of mind for each of you. For me, two really rise to the top in terms of traits. So the folks on my team kind of are hybrid of project managers and business development kind of competency and skill set. The first, which will resonate with all of you, hopefully, is leading without direct authority, right? That's really what we do as project professionals, right? So you're in charge of a project, but you might not have direct influence over someone in finance or someone in HR. So leading without direct authority. How do you do that, right? A lot of things, right? Servant leadership, emotional intelligence, leading with empathy, over-communicate, right? One of the things that I've, when I join new teams or I'm meeting my peers for the first time is understanding what success looks like for your stakeholders. If you can align your North Star, and hopefully that's your case when you're leading a project, but just think about day to day. Like what is Tricia gold by? Well, it's to execute a wonderful professional development day with her and her team. And so far, so good, right? So as she's coaching all of us, right? This is not scripted, I promise you. Keeping eyes on the prize, the North Star, which is to execute a eventful and engaging professional development day. So those are kind of the attributes that I kind of coach my team, and it's a gentle reminder for myself at times as well during chaos.
Thanks, Ben. Over-communicate is the one that stood out for me. I love that. And those traits are indeed essential for modern teams. They are. Kevin, can you share a story where applying core humility, the book that you wrote, can you share a story where applying Can you share a story where applying your core humility principles helped resolve a challenging project or team dynamic? And what changed as a result?
All right, thank you for that question. Challenged, and how did it impact the team? What was the result? Really, I think before I wrote the book, I had the workshop that I shared today. I had a version of that and kind of evolved it over time. And part of it was learned from some of the great leaders where I work again. I'm not advertising for Snohomish County PUD, but it is a great place to work. And a lot of employees, when the job opens up, they're telling their friends, "Hey, you got to come work here." So it's great. One thing, some of the leaders, so our CEO, John Harlow, just amazing person to work with. I've learned so much from him. So we have public meetings. We have 3 commissioners that are elected. We give the public time to come in twice a month, and they have 5 minutes to say whatever they want. And you can imagine. So a lot of times it's great things, and sometimes it's challenging things to deal with. We also have all-employee meetings. We'll have, there's supposed to be 1,200 people attending virtually or however. I don't know if they're all on there, but a lot of them are on there. And there will be some questions that come up. And I remember one time, it's like any open questions, and somebody asked our CEO, John Harlow, a tough question. And I was amazed at his response. It wasn't an attack on him. It was kind of just maybe attack, maybe it was some real concerns that somebody felt. And instead of taking it personally, he remained curious. And he asked some clarifying questions around it. And he didn't grasp onto the script the other person started with. He just kept things normal. He stayed himself. And so as that conversation continued, I noticed the other person becoming more, relaxed, more realistic, and more in the conversation, feeling part of it. And so that whole process, I was just in awe watching. And do I do that perfectly? No, I can't. It's hard. Maybe someday I will be able to, but it's something I try to do. And so I encourage my team members to bring up issues, to bring up concerns early. When the fire's small, I want to be able to fight it then rather than large. So please bring up things early. It's safe. It's okay. And if somebody's challenging me, I remember that example. And I try to stay, be respectful to the other person challenging me. And then that seems to de-escalate things too. And then you can talk about real things together.
Thanks for sharing that, Kevin. Humility does transform teams. And thank you for also sharing about the Snohomish beauty. And for all the people who are looking for jobs, it's good. Look into it.
3 openings right now.
Wow.
3 openings right now.
I might look into it. Tricia, from your experience with innovation portfolios, how do you measure the ROI of strategic innovation within a public sector or government PMO? And where usually in a public sector or government PMO, profit isn't the primary driver of success. So how do you measure ROI?
So in a public sector situation, the driver of success is value, of course, for the public. So value in terms of people's humanity, their economic situation, so where they are, improving their situation. So that's what the value, one of the values is. Because when we're discussing the public sector, our politicians are also within that, so they may have other motivations as well, which some of those motivations may be rooted in the profit sector as well as the nonprofit sector. So the value really has to be about communicating to your constituents and citizens how this will improve their daily lives. So we do, of course, also have, like in New Orleans, there was the Office of Economic Development. They're focused on profit for the city, but in how that benefits all of the people that are in the city. So when you're looking within that framework, innovation has to be based on trust, because they're trusting this PMO to constantly communicate how we're providing value, and if we aren't providing that value, what mitigation steps we have, or how we're going to reevaluate what our priorities are to ensure expediently that we're demonstrating that we have value for constituents.
Excellent point. Impact isn't always financial, and your approach highlights that well. Yes. Thank you. Ben, let's discuss the future beyond automation. What is the most significant strategic advantage a project leader gains by integrating Gen AI into their core practice?
What is the most competitive advantage that a strategic leader would realize by integrating? All right.
AI, yeah.
All right.
Gen
I gotta
AI.
watch what I say here, because I don't want you to take it for face value and go back and violate a bunch of your corporate policies. I just came out of Dan's session, so I'm very much thinking about policy. First stop, take a step back, understand your company, your situation. What is the appetite of leveraging Gen AI? Are there any rudimentary type of data policy sharing and so forth? For example, if you're on a Microsoft suite, there's Copilot there. If you need to use a tool, you probably kind of steer in that direction, for example. The biggest advantage, I would say, and I'll talk PMI as a use case. I'll start with Amazon Web Services where I work. It's not necessarily through automation, but leveraging Gen AI to do the lower valued work, things that are more operational, repeatable, and that have expected results. For example, designing an agent that collects all of our meeting notes from like Zoom, and then it spits out, the Gentic AI spits out the meeting notes, and you can even coach it to say, hey, why don't you also call out all the action items that came from it? And this is when we get a little quiet, right, from raising our hand and speaking on meetings. Tell me who is accountable for that. Then let's take those meeting notes, send it out to everyone, and then update my action item log. Also, any milestones based on that meeting, can you also update my project plan? But let me review the changes first before you put it into production. So very quickly, if you think about the core of what we do as project professionals, it's going back to the human factor. So we spend more time on building those relationships, de-escalating conflict. That doesn't change. It's those repeatable mechanisms that we could leverage. And then selfishly, as a PMO leader, it gives me more time to do the value proposition to the rest of my peers in the organization of what a PMO transformation office can do. Very quick pivot to portfolio view is if all of my project managers are operating as with that type of mental model at a portfolio level, if it's consistent, now I can take those updates and incorporate at the portfolio level. What that yields is a true real-time view of how the portfolio is doing and who's exceeding their KPIs and goals and so forth.
Thank you. I like that. That's
And
really...
my last minute plug, sorry.
Sorry.
On the PMI side, as practitioners, all of you, it's not a commercial, I'm not getting paid by PMI, but we have Infinity, which is like our own flavor of ChatGPT. For those of you, if there's one call to action, check out the infinity.org, PMI, PMIinfinity.org. Has all of our institutional PMI project management framework assets loaded in there. So whether you're a student, you're in transition from work, or you're just doing your own personal project, it helps bring that all together. So please do check that out.
Thanks for sharing. It's really insightful. So PMI Infinity it is, folks. Kevin, as leaders grow, personal practices are key. In a fast-paced and complex field, what personal practices help you stay grounded and continue growing as a leader?
I like that. So what personal practices help me stay grounded and improve as a leader?
Continue growing as a leader.
Growing as a leader. Okay, great, thank you. So years ago, so Stephen R. Covey, I love Stephen R. Covey, his writings, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So learned from him early on when that book was being written. And I remember him telling the story about sharpening the saw, and there's somebody's cutting down a tree, okay? And they're using a saw, and they're working really hard, but they're not making much progress. And somebody comes along and says, how about sharpening the saw? What are you doing? Oh, I'm cutting down a tree. Well, how are you doing? Oh, I'm working really hard. Great. How's the progress? Well, I don't have time to stop right now. I just no time for a break. I gotta keep sawing and not taking time to sharpen that saw, which would be more effective work. And so I think that's important. It's taking a break from that hectic life that you're talking about. So with that, he talks about 4 areas that help that I try to apply, not every single day, but I try to apply in balance. And So it's the physical area, the social, emotional areas, social, emotional, like intelligence in there too, and more of the reflective or spiritual areas. So those 4 areas right there. So I try to do something in those areas. Maybe it's for physical, exercising. This morning I had my family makes fun of me. I make a vegetable smoothie, okay, and it's if you want to find out about it, I'll tell you about it later. But anyway, I drink one of those in the morning with a chocolate protein mixed in with it, and it's delicious, and it kills all the vegetable flavor, but you keep the vitamins, so that's what I like about it. But anyway, stuff like that, you find out what works out for you. For learning things, I love reading books and trying to challenge my mind. So it's really just taking on those challenges in those different areas, I think helps create a strong foundation to be able to stand on. So when, the big storms happen, your feet are on the ground already.
Thanks, Kevin. I've heard that story that you mentioned about the saw. So it's comes down to sharpening your skills and, taking a break, taking a nap if you need to, and work on your skills. And then you also talk about, I forgot what your vegetable smoothie stands out for me. I think that is lovely to hear, and it's a great start to the morning too. And yeah,
vegetables aren't just for dinner.
Thank you. And staying grounded is essential for sustainable leadership. So yeah. Vegetable smoothie really stand out for me.
Let's talk about it later.
All right, Tricia, in your experience, what's the single hardest human habit to shift when leading large-scale technological innovation?
I would say that would be ego. And particularly I think in leadership and when you're leading any group, PMO, even your own household, definitely ego, because you have to always remember what your strategy or strategic goals are, and those can change, and they can change to things that are not necessarily a priority or value for you, but it's about the people that you are serving, which includes like even in a family situation, because that's where you, I think, first learn your leadership skills. And when I had children, realizing that I am a different leader for each one of my children because I'm in a different place in my life, and I can even have different expectations for them in terms of what I think their strategy should be in order to reach their goals. But I have to check my ego because my plans for them to reach those goals may not necessarily be theirs, and that can impact what they value. And I took that and I also apply that to when I'm leading groups or organizations, that I have to check my ego, because otherwise I can have in the back of my mind, okay, that's a ridiculous idea. That's not what you said in terms of how we were going to get to this goal. But it's not about me. It's about ensuring that I'm demonstrating the value that they need. I need to work through that on my own. So once I learn to check ego, then I realize that's also a challenge for other people within the organization as well. So I'd say ego.
Absolutely. And behavior change is always one of the toughest parts of innovation. It's time for the fun twist. Ben.
I'm sorry, what?
It's time
Is
for a
it double
fun twist.
jeopardy?
You're supposed to
Oh,
dance.
is it double
She wants you to
jeopardy
dance
already?
right now.
All right, fun twist.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
fun
Yes,
twist.
checker.
Yeah, I like that.
All right.
So, Ben, if you could have an AI assistant with one superpower to help you manage projects, what would it be and why?
Okay, I want to say remove my grouchy stakeholders, but I'm not trying to eliminate them because that's not what we do as project professionals. I think it goes back to more practical application. I think I do a little bit of this today, but I hope with the advancement of AI and tools available, it gets even more robust. But I talked to a Microsoft executive and I asked them, hey, you guys have Copilot. What do you do as an executive to leverage AI? I'm trying to steal some of his best practices. And he essentially created an executive assistant persona to help him manage his meetings, his priorities, and so forth. Taking that back to myself as a portfolio and project leader, it's really, if I could have anything, having GenAI manage within real-time conversation about risk and issues and having all my logs updated, having a meeting, having my action items all go out. And yeah, that's what I would want. All the things that we do already, having them kind of automated so that we can, again, still work on the relationships and working on the most high-value task at hand.
I love that. Imagine all the projects you could tackle with that superpower. Kevin, your fun twist on superpower is, if you could invent a superpower for project managers that blends emotional intelligence and AI, what would it be and how would it transform project leadership?
Okay, superpowers. All right. Are we talking about like Superman superpowers or Batman superpowers? Because does Batman really have superpowers? He can invent some cool things. I know that. So I'm going to go the Batman route. All right. So let's say I think it would be giving my project managers some vision enhancing AI glasses. Okay. So something I think it's important for us to be able to have the ability. We talked about in core humility, just about the ability to feel safe looking for others' strengths and to see their strengths and not being worried about those strengths being better than yours, even if a lot of them are better than yours. That's okay. But being able to generously see those strengths in other people. So number one, you can put people in the right place so they, you don't, if in baseball, you don't want the pitcher to be playing the catcher position and so forth. Have them in areas that they can do well in, but also being able to see some of the challenges that they have and okay, work with them, help them in choosing some areas to be able to grow. So I guess however that works, however those glasses work, just let me know. But something that can help people see that more in others.
Oh yeah, I love that. That would certainly change the game of PMs everywhere. Tricia, to finish on a light note, if your leadership style were a movie character or fictional leader, who would it be?
Okay, so this is going to involve a short story about my sons and my ex-husband. So, we were living in the Netherlands, and my youngest son was about 14 years old. He had friends from school, and I think sometimes they would forget that I spoke Dutch as well, just as well probably as my ex-husband, who is Dutch. But at home, I always spoke English with the children, and my ex-husband always spoke Dutch exclusively, because we wanted them to not have an accent or a discernible accent in the language, as well as to fully understand the language. And so my youngest son, he had a friend that he wanted to have play at our house. So, normally they go to school on bikes, so I had to go and pick the kids up with the bikes, as well as have them sit in the back. And the friend had asked him, and he's asking him this in Dutch, because he thought that, American mom, she doesn't speak Dutch. So he asked my son, what's it like at your house? What can I expect? And so I'm driving, and my youngest, he pauses for a moment, and he goes, have you ever seen that movie, The Matrix? And he's like, yeah, I've seen that. He's like, so my mom is Morpheus, and my dad is Neo. And then, so I'm like, okay, I want to hear more of this. And he's like, so how is that? So he says, my mom, it's like she wakes up and she has this vision for you to be the best you can be, and she's not going to tell you how she's going to ask you a bunch of questions and then push you to be better, versus my dad, he's just going to tell you what to do. And he does the same, or my mom does the same thing to him. And I can see that he thinks that, these things are his ideas, but it's really my mom telling him what he needs to do. So after that, when, I started working, I realized that, I do have a vision for people that are around me to be the best leaders that they can be, and I don't usually tell them that. I try to develop those skills within them so that they can come to that realization versus me just telling them that, hey, you can be this. So I owe my youngest son, so I'd say Morpheus. I'm Morpheus.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. All right, it's time to answer questions from our audience. Let's take a look at what's coming in from Slido and hear from our panelists. All right. One of the most voted questions is, who is a leader that has most impacted your personal leadership style? What lesson from them do you carry forward today? I'm going to repeat. Who is a leader that has most impacted your personal leadership style? What lesson from them do you carry forward to today? Ben, would you like to share?
Sure. What
Leadership style.
what
So
leadership style, yeah?
who is a leader
Yeah.
that has most impacted your personal leadership style? Kevin, are you ready? Like if you want to.
I can.
Sure, go first.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of a couple right now, but influence my leadership style. I would have to say, again, I mentioned Stephen R. Covey earlier. I think because I was very young when I was learning his principles, so I was just like curious about, how do I live this life thing? What do I do? And I think one thing that there's so many. I read his book every couple of years just to reiterate it, because it just the principles continue. So that, I think he's the one leader that's influenced my life the most. And I think one part of it is just realizing everybody's human. We're all in the same family. We're all in the same family. And so treat each other well, treat each other as equals, help lift other people up. And, as a leader, keep yourself in a solid state so that you can have a good vision for those who are maybe struggling, and be there to encourage them.
Thanks for sharing that, Kevin. So 7 habits of highly effective people it is, folks. And anyone else want to share anything about that? Like add on to their personal experience about, their personal leadership style?
So when I lived in the Netherlands, there was a prime minister. His name was Wim Kok. And I appreciated his leadership style because moving there as an American, and when he became leader, he resigned after, I think there were a good 7, 8 years. And from my perspective, living there, everything was going well. And I came home, and my ex-husband says, oh, he just resigned. I'm like, why? He's the prime minister. Why would he resign? And he said, well, he said that he needed to resign because Parliament could not agree. And as a leader, if he could not have the majority of factions agree with one another to move the government forward, then he needed to resign, because then he was not the leader that the country needed. And that, I was in my early 20s when that happened, and that really reminded me that you also have to be the leader that your organization or people need. You can have all the best skills and you're demonstrating value, but if you're not the person that they need to continue and you can't have people come to a consensus, then even as a leader, it's a demonstration of excellence in leadership if you step away. So, what he did, that really struck with me, because my idea at that point as a leader was, well, a leader just goes in and, this is how it's going to be. But no, he gracefully resigned. So.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Tricia. All right, we have another question, the most voted I'm picking. If you had to pick just one skill that project managers should sharpen to stay ahead of AI and all the changes happening in the market, what would it be? Who would like to go? If you had to pick just one skill that project managers should sharpen to stay ahead of AI and all the changes happening in the market, what would it be?
I'll take a first stab at this. I would say we as project professionals, we have our strong attributes and traits, which I think, and hopefully the rest of our organization can come to appreciate, being the planning aspect, the accountability, the EQ, right? Hopefully you're a likable project manager so folks want to work with you again. I think the part that gets overlooked many times as it pertains to AI is what we can and what we can't do. So staying, I would say, at the tip of the spear abreast, being a part of that tiger team that is involved with AI policy, AI data governance, and how you kind of protect the use of that information. So this could be industry specific, it could be specific intellectual property that your company possesses in terms of products and services, so that you maintain that kind of top position. Or even if you're in a second position, even more so, that maintaining that competitive edge. So I think that's overlooked many times, and I think having someone with a project project leadership role as part of that group really pays dividends for the company's profitability and journey.
I like that, thank you. All right, next question.
Can I answer that one too?
Yes, sure.
Just really quick. I love what you said there, Ben. I mean, at work, I like to say that AI has no soul, okay? And we have a soul. And so it's important for us to keep it that way. AI might say it does, but it doesn't. And so I think having that connection with people and that intuition, you get that little spidey sense, I need to go talk to this person. People can do that. So maintain that, stay sharp in that.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah. You really resonate with that because you need to be grounded. Moving on to the next question. What recommendations do you have for managing distributed teams when companies have unequal RTO policies across teams and even within the same team? This one's tricky. What recommendations do you have for managing distributed teams when companies have unequal RTO policies across teams and even within the same team?
That was unequal what was the unequal part?
RTO policies.
Audio policy?
Return to office, right?
Return to office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just know simple words.
So what recommendations do you have for managing distributed teams when companies have unequal return to office policies across teams and even within the same team?
I'll take a stab at this if you don't mind.
Please.
I don't think there's a perfect answer, right? So some of us here lead teams, you folks in the audience. At the end of the day, companies have been, it's a reflection of what's happening in the industry. Folks want in-person collaboration. COVID proved that we can do virtual or hybrid. Regardless of that, interpreting a company's RTO or return to hub, return to team, you call it, is very convoluted, right? Unless it's stated that everyone has to go in 5 days a week, then there's very little for interpretation. How I interpret the question is that there are varying flavors of it, and how do we enforce it? With my immediate team, I actually manage a globally dispersed team, so I can't be in Atlanta, Georgia today and be in San Francisco tomorrow. Otherwise, I would be flying multiple flights and I would never end up there. So I do, some things that I do kind of basic rules of engagement is like, I cherish the time I have with them. Many times it is virtual. I also do a rotation of in-person visits when I can, assuming your budget allows for it. But I also kind of keep an open door, if you would. Sometimes that door is virtual, where they can come to you at any time, and you promote that safe workspace. At times when, if there is a feeling of inequity, I think it warrants a conversation so that, if someone is abusing something in terms of not coming into office when that's the expectation for collaboration, I think it warrants a discussion like, hey, how is this working better for you? And just trying to understand that. Yeah, and if you folks want to add to that, feel free to.
So when I've worked in New Orleans, and currently I'm working with a team that's in Bilbao, Spain, and when we have groups that, with this disparate policy, I always shift conversations back to data. So I have told teams that, okay, then make your team a PMO if you feel that they're receiving, they're working remotely and we aren't. I don't like conversations just based on feelings, so explain to me, provide qualitative and quantitative data on what they're doing, as well as provide me a value statement of why you believe that we should be working 100% remotely too. So apply those same principles that you apply to your position in advocating for how we need to balance out this system.
I like that. Thank you. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Ben, Kevin, Tricia. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights. Your perspectives on leadership, innovation, AI, and the human side of project management have given us so much to think about. Let's give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you, everyone. And I would like to pass over on to our mistress of ceremonies, Phoi. Thank you so much, Phoi.
Thank you, Neha, and thank you for all our panelists. I'd just like to reiterate what Neha said. We learned so much, and thank you for sharing all your expertise on leadership. And thank you, everyone, for being here. So we'll take a short 5-minute break, and we'll be on to our next exciting panel about emerging technology. So right now, we'll have a break.
Thank you.